I've made a lot of dumb decisions in my life that have led me to like rehab. And I've had a lot of my mental health challenges that I've personally gone through. And I've made not the best decisions in my life, but the best decision that I have made in my life was to stay true to me about not having kids.
Wow.
And I say that, and I don't regret that. And so I want your listeners who may be grappling with this, if you're leaning on the side of like not wanting to have children, and you can't force yourself to want something. Like that's it's just human nature. You can't make another human being change, and you can't force yourself and pressure yourself into wanting something, especially as something as life altering as having kids.
I'm Keltie Maguire, and you're listening to the Kids Are Childfree podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Kids Are Childfree podcast. I gotta say, for all of the crap on the internet, there's also a lot of really good content out there. And much of it, fortunately, comes across my feed because I try and curate a positive, interesting, upbeat sort of online environment. So it is a very high compliment to say that when this particular video came through my socials feed, I thought, oh my gosh, what wisdom this person has shared. And I absolutely must get her on the podcast. I'm talking about Vasavi Kumar, and one particular video I saw where she was talking about being honest with ourselves and how when we are honest with ourselves, there's nothing anyone can really say about us to kind of throw us off our game, if you will, because we know who we are inherently. And I thought, being honest with ourselves, knowing who we are, that's really what's at the core of this Kids Are Child-Free decision. And as it turns out, Vasavi is also child-free by choice. So just very, very excited to share so much of her wisdom with you today. Vasavi Kumar is a therapist, author, and podcast host passionate about empowering individuals to embrace their authentic selves. Living with bipolar disorder, Vasavi brings a unique perspective to conversations around mental health, self-talk, and personal growth. As the author of Say It Out Loud and host of the Say It Out Loud podcast, she inspires audiences to break free from societal expectations and live in alignment with their truth. Through coaching, writing, and speaking, Vasavi helps people build confidence, navigate life's complexities, and create meaningful change. Vasavi, thank you so much for being here today. As I just shared with you, I saw one of your videos come across my Instagram feed, and I was like, this is the woman we need to have onto the podcast. And then I learned that you were child-free by choice, and I thought, okay, we definitely have to have her to come on because I feel like you're kind of going to like school all of these undecided people today and like,
I hope so.
Yeah, give them like a little bit of, I don't want to say tough love, but sometimes when we're in indecision, we just need someone to really gently yet firmly help support us to connect with ourselves and get clear on what we want. And I understand you're about all of those things. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and what we need to know.
What you need to know, my name is Vasavi Kumar. I live in Austin, Texas with my golden retriever. For work, I'm a licensed therapist and I'm a visibility coach. So I work with coaches, entrepreneurs, small business owners to become more vocal and visible, not only in their lives, but in their businesses as well. I truly believe that it is our duty as human beings to really figure out what we're good at in this lifetime and then promote ourselves and sing it off the rooftops and let people know what we have to offer so as to help another human being. Because you never know who you can help with your programs, your podcast, your services. So that's what I love doing. And I also forgot to mention, I'm the author of the book, Say It Out Loud. I wrote a book in 2022 about how to transform the way you speak to yourself, your self-talk, your inner dialogue. And the name of my book is called Say It Out Loud. And I'm also the host of the Say It Out Loud podcast. And I've been doing this work for about 14 years. And being child-free is something that I am not usually asked about, but when I am asked about it, I can go off on it. So I'm excited for this conversation today, Keltie.
Awesome. Okay, super cool. And I mean, you just talking about like, I live in Austin, which shout out to everybody in Austin because it's such a cool city and you have a golden retriever. Like, I love you so much already. Okay. I am curious to know, now you are child-free by choice. Had you always known that you would not have children, or when did this decision come into play in your life?
I always knew that I did not want to have children. There was never a part of me that questioned it. Even when I got married and divorced, I've been married and divorced, I knew going into my marriage, I wasn't going to have kids. I told my husband, like, I'm not going to change my last name and I'm not going to have children. And he knew that. My husband, my ex-husband at the time, my husband at the time, now my ex, he knew that going into this marriage that I was not going to have kids. And he didn't try to change my mind. He didn't try to convince me otherwise. So I was very blessed in that sense.
Yeah.
But I always knew I did not want to have kids.
Now, I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but not knowing something and being clear on it doesn't mean that that's always an easy path to walk. So I'm curious for you, like, despite having that clarity, was there ever either internal or external pushback, like either you grappling with internalized judgments or other people in your life being like, oh, come on, you're going to change your mind?
So here's the thing. I think it's also the way I was raised in the community that I was raised in. So I'm raised in I'm a first generation Indian immigrant. My parents came here in the 70s. I'm the youngest of two daughters. So I don't think I had the pressure put on me like the way my sister did. When my sister turned like 20 something, it was like, all right, time to get married, time to have kids, all that good stuff. Like the clock is ticking. I did not have that pressure on me. So I didn't have those external forces, nor did I feel it internally. I think there was a point maybe in my 30s, Keltie, where I was like, am I weird for not wanting kids? Like I questioned myself in terms of like, is there something wrong with me? Because I'm so adamantly against having kids for myself, right? Like I thought that there was something wrong with me, like the maternal bone was missing in my body, or that I just wasn't a nurturing person. But I didn't have that pressure growing up. I can honestly say that. I had pressure for other things like being good in school, being successful, but it never did I have that pressure to have kids. And I think the only thing internally that I dealt with was like, am I womanly enough? Like that was a question, but that still wasn't enough of a conflict for me to go ahead and say, okay, you know what? I think I'm going to have kids. I still didn't question myself.
Yeah. I relate so much to those narratives, those exact words rung in my head, which was weird. The like, am I womanly? And like, why am I not womanly enough? Because I'm like, when do I want to be womanly? Like I've always said, like, it's not an attribute that I held near and dear, but it felt like I should be this way. And I also was like, what is wrong with me? Like, I actually wondered like maybe hormonally if something was off or if there was something, I don't know, like in my brain that wasn't properly connected. So how did you ultimately, it sounds like it wasn't enough, but I'm guessing today you don't think there's anything wrong with you, I hope.
No, I'm not.
And if so, it's not that, right? I always say, maybe I'm weird, but it's not that.
I jokingly say to my sister and my mother, you know, I've made a lot of dumb decisions in my life that have led me to like rehab. And I've had a lot of my mental health challenges that I've personally gone through. And I've made not the best decisions in my life, but the best decision that I have made in my life was to stay true to me about not having kids.
Wow.
And I say that, and I don't regret that. And so I want your listeners who may be grappling with this, if you're leaning on the side of like not wanting to have children, and you can't force yourself to want something. Like it's just human nature. You can't make another human being change, and you can't force yourself and pressure yourself into wanting something, especially as something as life altering as having kids.
Yeah. So interestingly, this just came up on a call yesterday. I was talking with a gentleman actually who said like, you know, he wants to be the person who wants kids, but I said, what if you could just learn to accept the person who doesn't want kids and be good with that person and love that person rather than trying to change your desires? And I so get this idea. And I've had many people say to me, I want to want it, but I don't want it. Like there is this longing to have that desire that would just like bring us into line, so to speak, and normalize us. But okay, so I have so many questions for you. So if somebody like just doesn't feel like that longing is there and they're grappling with that, they're judging themselves, how can they start to perhaps find some compassion and acceptance for that lack of desire to be a mom or a parent for that matter?
Well, I talk about this in my book. It all starts with how you speak to yourself, right? So if you notice that your inner dialogue is kind of shitty and you're not being very kind to yourself, say that out loud. Like, what are you saying to yourself about this situation? In this case, you not wanting to have kids, and actually say those words out loud. Like, what are the judgments? What are you saying to yourself? How are you talking to yourself? Actually say that out loud. So it might sound something like, I'm not womanly enough, or there must be something wrong with me. And then we have to learn how to question those voices in our head that are telling us that there's something wrong with us, that maybe we're just not good enough. Maybe there's something inherently flawed with us. And we have to learn how to question these narratives that we've now absorbed from society, from media, from other women around us, from from maybe our partners, from our family. And we have to question that. And then we have to bring more compassion. And it's easier said than done. Here's the thing about self-help and personal growth. It's easy when you're feeling yourself and you're looking good and you're feeling good to love yourself. It's a lot harder to bring that compassion when you're in the thick of it. But this is exactly where we get to practice more compassion with ourselves and ask ourselves, is this the way that I'm speaking to myself about this situation? Do I want to continue on in this way? How would I speak to myself if I was speaking to a tender young child? Right?
Yeah.
We have to bring that compassion to ourselves, because this is not a joke, right? We're not talking about buying a new car. We're talking about bringing human beings into this world. Even if it's just one, that's still a lot of work. And if you are sure, and if there's that part of you that's certain that you don't want to have kids, and you have to honor that.
Yeah.
You got to honor that and not beat yourself up over it. Clarity is queen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're speaking my language 100%. And I know for me, and again, I've talked about this many times on the podcast, so people are probably tired of hearing about it, but this is a good opportunity to showcase it. Being compassionate with myself and the way that I felt was a huge part of me getting clear on that. Like, I still had this indecision. I wasn't really sure, even though, of course, looking back, I'm like, well, there wasn't really a part of you at any point that wanted kids very much. Being like, it's okay, I feel this way. There's nothing wrong with you. Rather than like, there was so much internal name calling and self-criticism. And I love this advice. And this is what your book is all about, is like quite literally saying it out loud so you can hear yourself. I'm sure you, like me, if people sit in front of me and the way they talk to themselves, I'm like, this is appalling.
Yes. When I hear the way and I have to say, a lot of my clients are excellent with their self-talk because they've been working with me for a while now.
You don't tolerate that.
I don't tolerate it. I always call it out, because that's what you're going to get when you're in my presence. I will not let you talk badly about yourself. But when I'm just working with someone new and I see the way they speak to themselves, and it's like, well, no wonder you're struggling with this decision. You're beating yourself up every step of the way. And I love what you said about like accepting the version of you that doesn't want to have kids. Right? It's not like forcing yourself to be the person that wants to have kids, rather than saying, you know what, in this season of my life, I don't want to have kids. It might change. That could change. Like for me personally, that's not going to change. I know myself. I'm 42 at this point. And even if I decided, I would not change my mind. I know myself, and it all boils down to knowing yourself. And that's what I want your listeners to really get, is that like, if you wanted to have kids, you would know. I personally think you would have an inkling, you would have that longing. But if you're the kind of person that's just like, I don't want to have kids, then put down the proverbial bat and stop beating yourself up over it. And to your point, accept where you're at.
Yeah. I like what you say about like in this season. And sometimes that's also a starting point. Like I get that people want to come to a definitive lifelong decision. At a certain point, we are required to do that unless we want life to decide for us. But sometimes that can just like allow us to settle a little bit into the decision, to be like, okay, let's just be in this season, and not just like postpone it, but really be like, right now, I don't want kids. I know this for sure. Start with what you know right now, as opposed to all the questions of the future. Another thing, which for some people might feel a little bit esoteric, but actually something that's given me a little bit of comfort, is the idea that in this lifetime, I choose not to have kids.
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe in a future life, do I believe in reincarnation and other lives? I don't know. TBD. But for some reason, there's just this feeling, it makes it feel like we know this, the universe is so big, and like our capacity for our souls is so grand, to think about right now in this lifetime that I have found myself in, based on the decisions that I've made that have led me to this point in time. I choose not to have children, but I don't know, maybe I'll be a mother of 10 somewhere else in some alternate universe.
We get to question. Listen, we have the ability to question what we've been told and to question our beliefs. And I love what you said also. Yeah. Like in this season, I don't want to have kids. Like, you're allowed to give yourself the gift of just pausing, and also not knowing. You're also allowed to not know. You don't have to have a definitive answer. But if you are the kind of person that is pretty definitive about your not wanting kids, I would honor that deeply.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have kids because they think that that's what they need to be doing or should be doing. So consider yourself very blessed if you are clear on this.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And I do think, this certainly some people listening, this is going to resonate and they're going to be like, yeah, I've really just been denying this part of myself that doesn't want it at all. And there's also a bunch more people who are probably feeling much more ambivalent and mixed up. And, let's just run a hypothetical scenario. I've had a few clients bring this to me, and that is they've always felt pretty sure they wouldn't have kids, or they felt very indifferent. They didn't really picture it for themselves. Now, suddenly, and, I had a woman yesterday, she said, I don't know what in my life has happened or changed, but suddenly I think this is something I want. The question is often for them, is this me? Is this because I really want it? Or is it because, oh, look, my best friend just had a baby. And oh, look, my mom keeps asking me when me and my partner are going to have kids, and so on and so forth. So I guess the bigger question is, how do you suggest someone starts to disentangle what is theirs? What are their true feelings and desires versus maybe some other programming or something else that's leading them to think they feel that way?
I talk about this in the book. And the question that you can ask yourself is, whose voice is this? Whose voice is this? Like, is this my voice, or is this mom's voice, or is this best friend's voice? Yeah. Is this society's voice? You have to be able to distinguish between your voice and the voices of others. And I'm not saying that when you get connected to your voice, it's going to feel like fairies and magic dust. It's going to feel a little uncomfortable because we are not taught to listen to our own voices, to our voice. We are taught to listen to what everyone else tells us to do. So just be mindful that when you actually tune in and tap into your voice, it might feel a little uncomfortable at first because we have been programmed to ignore our voice and do what society tells us to do. Yeah. So just be mindful of that.
Okay. And I know this is, of course, your life's work. And I do want to, I read the book. I think you do, you do a great job at a lot of things in the book, but something I really appreciated as a coach is how clearly you sort of explain how beliefs and these sort of various, constructs come about and how we can question them. You talk about questioning, I don't know if you use the word belief, but it effectively, is this true? Am I really the world's biggest asshole because I don't want kids or whatever? I think you do a beautiful job in the book of really helping someone to unpack some of the beliefs that may not be serving them. And I know, and I'm sure you'd agree, regardless of where you're at on this sort of decision spectrum and how you're feeling, there are certain things you are believing and telling yourself and that have been ingrained that are preventing you from connecting with what you want. Without, giving it all, it's not even about giving it all away. It's obviously an in-depth process, but how can somebody start to connect with and know, when you say know their own voice, how do I know it's me who's talking and not someone else?
I always say that you can tell what your voice is when you feel safe and relaxed. So my true authentic voice, I put that in quotes because we use the word authentic very freely, but my authentic voice, Keltie, is the voice that I use when I'm feeling safe and relaxed. That's usually around my sister. That's around my best friend. I mean, I feel very safe and relaxed inside of my body. I've done a lot of nervous system regulation work. I work very hard to keep myself regulated, but it's the voice that is safe and relaxed, the voice that doesn't need to perform, the personality that doesn't need to be on all the time. And so I don't mind giving it all away. It really is just a matter of being,
I just want people to read your book, Vasavi. So
thank you. So I appreciate, yes, get my book, say it out loud. It will definitely help transform the way you speak to yourself. But yeah, I always say like that voice that is yours, like that's that voice that only you know. Right? Like you're with yourself all the time. You know when you're being real and when you're not being real. And so it's really tapping into that part of you that's 100% being true to you. How do you speak when you're being true to you?
Yeah.
How do you speak when you're performing for others or even performing for the people inside of your head? Right? So what does that voice sound like? You could start getting more connected back to that voice if you ask yourself, like, who am I when I'm just being myself?
Yeah.
And that's a question I cannot answer that for you. You have to be true to you and know when you're being real with yourself and with others and when you're not, when you're being honest with yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's, it's discernment, right? First of all, like you say, no one else can know, but I think it requires practice and really tuning in and paying attention. I want to go back to you and your decision for a second, because it sounds like, this is, and I always like to ask people when, it's funny, I'm catching my own, I shouldn't say judgment, bias here, because I'm not sure I ask moms quite the same way. But for people who are child free and they feel like this is really just an inherent decision, or it comes very naturally, would you say there are contributing factors, if you will, that led you to feel this way? Or do you believe this is like the way you were born, so to speak?
Wow, what a great question. I don't think I was born this way. I think that because of my own upbringing and my childhood, I chose, and I knew from a young age, I don't want to have children. I was what you could describe as a parentified child. Both my sister and I were both parentified children. We were emotional caregivers for our mothers, for our mother. My mother, I don't like to say this often, but she's quite emotionally immature. And growing up, we had to mother our mother. So I grew up very quickly, emotionally. Thanks to my dad, I got to have a really great childhood. My dad took us out. He kept us kids. We had a great childhood, but there was definitely moments of where we had to cater to our mother's emotional needs. And I just knew, like, I don't want to be mothering anybody ever, because I did that in my childhood. I catered to my mother. My mother would have her mood swings. She would have her temper tantrums. She'd walk out of the house. We had to constantly cater to my mother's every move, every need. Had to protect my father because my mother was very harsh with my dad. So I was either always defending my dad, which no child should have to do, or, scared of my mother because she was quite scary growing up. She yelled a lot at us. She hit us a lot. She hit me a lot. And so, I mean, I know you probably didn't expect me to go there, but like when you have a childhood where you're not really being a child, I can't, for me personally, I did not want to go through that. I did not want to mother anyone but myself at that point.
I'm really grateful that you went there, as you said, because this is a question I've actually had from people. I always ask people, message me, ask me what you want to hear tell me what you want to hear on the podcast. And this is a question that's come up for people before, specifically this notion of, that they feel or they experience being parentified, and that it's really shifted and changed their desire or lack of desire for having kids. What would you say? I mean, if somebody's had that experience and they feel like, oh, it's like really, I don't know, it's sort of like a thorn in the decision-making ointment or whatever the saying is, that sometimes I think when we can attribute our feelings back to particular experiences that we've had, it's easy to have resentment or to have this feeling of like, well, if only my mom hadn't done that, then maybe I would, quote, be normal and want the thing. So was that something you had to grapple with? Or how would you suggest other people who are maybe it's not parentification, maybe it's the loss of a parent, maybe it's, some having a disabled sibling, whatever it may be, that they feel like is like sort of impinging upon their ability to make this decision or the desire that they wish they had?
I'm going to make sure I try to answer your question because I think there was like two parts to that question.
Yeah, there's always like 12 parts.
It's okay. I didn't feel the need to blame my mother because on my own, I didn't want to have kids. It's a lot of work to have children. I'm just going to say it. It's a lot of work emotionally, financially, mentally, physically. I did not want to do that on top of the fact I was parentified, right? So it's two parts. It's like, I did not want to have children because it is a lot of work. And I see the way my sister, who has 2 kids, and she's a doctor, she's a working mother, and she's a mom, like how hard she works. And like, I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I think there's nothing wrong with that. Like, there's nothing wrong with saying that. Like, I don't want to do that type of work. I don't want to. It's a lot of emotional labor, physical labor, mental labor. And that's just not something that I want in this lifetime. Yeah. I don't want that in this lifetime. So for people out there who maybe, it's never going to make you feel good to blame somebody else for the decisions that you made. You got to own your choices. Amen. So it's very easy to be like, well, it's my mother's fault that I don't want to have kids. No, it's not. I mean, I had a certain experience growing up as a child. It sucked. And I'm also a sovereign being and I can make my own choices. And I've chosen that I don't want to have kids. So it's a both and. You can honor what you've been through without penalizing and criminalizing somebody else. Yeah. You don't have to, because that's just going to keep you in victim mode.
I think if somebody's struggling with this, and I totally agree, like living in a place of blame, like good luck, have fun, because you're going to be miserable, right? There's always going to be someone or something we can point the finger at. I like to approach things with, first of all, a bit of an attitude of curiosity as far as like, interesting, that may have sort of influenced or impacted the way that I feel. At the end of the day, though, we get to make that decision. And I think we can also look to people who perhaps had similar experiences. I mean, you mentioned your sister was parentified. Well, she made the decision to have children, right?
And she decided to do things differently. And I just want to say that, like, it's also a really beautiful thing if you've been in a situation where you're parentified or for whatever reason, all the odds were against you. But you still chose to have children to do things differently. I swear my inner child has healed watching my sister parent my niece and nephew. The way she is, the kind of mother she is to my niece and nephew has healed me. And I've told her that, like, to her face. And so you can heal those generational traumas and those cycles. You can be the change, but I didn't want to be that change. I just wanted to heal myself.
Yeah. All right, I have created something new for you. And let me tell you, if I was still on the fence about kids, I would be whipping out my credit card so fast right now in order to purchase what I'm about to share with you. I've created what I'm calling the Kids or Child Free Support Series. And what this is this is a 6-month-long series of monthly recurring events, or occurring events, I should say, different topics each month that are going to help you tackle aspects of your decision that are keeping you stuck. The great thing about this series is I've kept the price super affordable. So each of these sessions is $45. And yes, you can pick and choose. You don't have to attend the whole series, but you can drop in and check out the events that relate best to where you're struggling. That said, if you want to take advantage of the whole series, I have what is called the All Access Pass. And that's going to give you access to all of these events for a further discounted price. So we've already had our first session, our January session, but if you want to take advantage of these 5 additional sessions and attend those either live, or yes, there will be a recording if you can't attend live, you're going to be able to get access to those for $150 for those 5 events, which works out to $30 a pop. Or again, you can purchase them a la carte, if you will, for $45 each. We've got sessions ranging from topics like, how do you make a decision in this sort of uncertain world that we're living in? We're going to be talking about FOMO one month. We're going to be talking about what to do with other people and their opinions on this topic. We've got lots of great stuff in store for you. And over and above these sessions, I have also created a dedicated Slack community where when you buy tickets to one or more of the events, or when you purchase your All Access Pass, you're going to get access to this Slack community where we're going to be having ongoing conversation and discussion about the different aspects of this decision that have got you feeling stuck. I'm going to be sharing different resources with you. It's going to be a private space where we can really discuss and get into this kids or child-free choice. So again, that is the Kids or Child Free Support Series. I would be pulling my credit card out to purchase this All Access Pass because again, you're going to get access to 5 2-hour sessions on topics ranging from fear of missing out to what if you regret your decision in the future, all those things that I know are at the forefront of your mind. These are some of the topics that I hear from people again and again. And I'm going to be sharing exercises and questions. We'll be having discussion to help you navigate the different aspects of your kids or child-free choice. Okay, I will include the link with the details in the show notes of today's episode where you can get your All Access Pass or you can get tickets for upcoming events. I will mention the All Access Pass is only going to be available until mid-February when we have our second support series event. And after that, you can continue to purchase tickets on an ad hoc basis as you wish to attend them. All right, back to the show. I want to talk a little bit about mental health. Now, how much, and again, it sounds like the way I see it, and I feel very similarly, there are certain things that I will tell you, and it's not to justify my decision, but for example, like current state of the world, climate change, the environment, I think it solidifies my lack of desire to have kids and like feels like a really good reason why I haven't had them. But in and of itself, I fly in a plane, right? Like I would have surmounted that, or I don't want to say rationalized to myself having children, but what I'm understanding and hearing from you is like, it's just not something you wanted. And at the same time, I know you've shared that some of the mental health challenges that you've faced have probably further reinforced or perhaps have like, I guess what I want to say is I know this is a topic we wanted to address. So I'm wondering how you see it as far as framing both your own decision and in general, if someone grapples with their mental health.
I can't tell anybody what to do with their life if they're struggling with mental health challenges because it is a personal decision. But for me, I live with bipolar disorder. I've lived with bipolar disorder and ADHD. I was diagnosed 20 something years ago, more than 20 something years ago. So I've been on medication for the past 20 years, over 20 years. And it's a lot. It's a lot to live with bipolar disorder. Like I can't sugarcoat shit here. It is a lot to live with a mental illness, a mental disorder, a brain that's wired differently with chemistry imbalance and having to take medication for that. I'm already a full-time job. Taking care of me, working with my clients, running a business. And I wouldn't swap entrepreneurship for anything because with my condition and the way my brain is wired, I work very well for myself. I'm very disciplined. I'm very organized. I can't work for somebody else. So it works for me. But like I just said, I'm a 24/7 job. And so what I don't want this to come off as is like, oh, so you're saying I shouldn't have kids because I have mental health challenges. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying to be real with yourself. That's all I'm saying, because I knew for me, it is a 24/7 job to make sure that I am taking care of myself. I got to eat right. I got to hydrate. I got to move my body. I got to maintain my thoughts. I got to look at my beliefs. I have to make sure that I'm surrounded myself with right people. I'm not consuming media that's putting me into a downward spiral. It's all the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves. It's like that times 10 for me.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. So I did not want to bring a child into this world and then make that child feel like a burden on the days that it felt like a burden for me. Like some days my brain feels like a burden and I would never want to put that on a child.
Yeah.
So I made that decision. It was even more reinforced for me when I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. No one told me you can't have kids. No one said that to me. I decided. When I knew that, like, when I really researched what it means to have bipolar disorder, the mood swings, the brain chemistry, the intrusive thoughts, being on medication, the things that I would have to do to heal myself. And I really feel stable. Like I have been very stable for the past 2.5 years since I've decided to get back on meds. Like things are really good in my life right now. Yeah. But but before that, things were really hard. Imagine if I had a kid on top of that. So like I didn't want to put my burdens on somebody else just so I could say I had a kid. So that's how my mental health challenges have informed me and my decision to not have children.
Yeah. Your words, there's like, I feel such resonance. Now, I do not struggle with bipolar. However, I have, and for a long time, struggled with anxiety and depression. Likewise, I've been on medication for probably about 20 years, on and off. On is a way better idea, as I've discovered. I have dealt with chronic pain. I had undiagnosed endometriosis for quite a time. And certainly there are many people with depression, endometriosis, pelvic pain, anxiety who have children. And for them, that is that right decision. But I just like what you say echoes so deeply inside of me, this idea of like, it is enough to just take care of me. And I feel like what a gift and a privilege to be able to just love ourselves in this lifetime and just like, that's it. Not to say we don't love other people, of course, but to be able to just take care of me. I think I totally agree. We need to ask ourselves, what are our capacities? What are the ramifications if in spite of a lack of capacity we have a child, not just for me, but for that child or for children, for my relationship? And would I have been a terrible mother as a result of having kids anyways? I don't know. But interestingly, it was my partner who did say, at times, like, I feel a bit concerned that you may have resentment, that you are sometimes emotionally volatile, and are parents sometimes emotionally volatile? Yes. And how is that for their children? It's terrible. Right?
No,
like,
not good.
Yeah.
I didn't want to
be a future
re-traumatize.
therapy visit. Yeah.
I didn't want to re-traumatize my children when I already felt so traumatized. Oh, let's just bring another person into this world and see where this goes. Yeah. No, thank you. Like life was hard enough. And I think we have to honor that question. Do I have the capacity to have a kid? Like, just be honest with yourself. Like, and maybe you do. And that's great. But if you can be real with yourself, you might find that, especially if you're struggling with mental health challenges, that you don't right now. And that doesn't make you a failure. It makes you honest.
Yeah. And to do it well, or at least good enough, right? Like they say, parenting, you need to get it right, 70% of the time or something. But yes, could we struggle through? Sure. But is that how you want to show up to your experience of having a child? And is that what you want to bring, is like for it to be strife and struggle?
No, Not at all. And that's exactly what it is. Like if I'm going to do something, I'm an all in person. I do not half-ass anything. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it all in. And my heart was not all in when it came to having kids, but ask me to like record a podcast episode or write a book. I can be all in with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's like when it came to kids, I had to listen to my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to just talk a little bit more about the book and get a little bit more specifically into this concept of saying it out loud. And I guess I'm wondering, how can we apply this concept of saying it out loud for people who are on the fence? Like, is there, I don't know, a specific question or practice you could suggest to them saying it out loud if they're trying to figure out which way they want to decide?
I would say the very first question, and I have a free resource for everyone here if they're interested in this. Yeah. So I always say, listen, we stand in front of the mirror at least once a day when we're brushing our teeth, when we're washing our face, whatever, or when we pass by a mirror. So if this concept of saying things out loud to yourself and responding back is weird, just start by standing in front of the mirror. It's called mirror work. And just ask yourself a question. How am I doing really today? Check in with yourself. Like just, how am I feeling? Maybe you have a big presentation coming up. All right. How are we feeling about this presentation? And actually get yourself to respond back, connect with yourself in the mirror. That is a surefire way to just keep yourself honest. Look at yourself in the mirror and respond back. So this is really for my people who want to deepen their intimacy that they have within themselves. I've created a free 365 days of mirror work prompts. I'll give you the link for that. Yeah, 365 please. Days of mirror work prompts. It's a beautifully designed workbook. Ask yourself a question every single day in front of the mirror. But yeah, that would be my first way to get started, is to just stand in front of the mirror, look at yourself. And even if you're dealing with this question about, do I want to have kids? Like stand in front of the mirror, look at yourself and ask yourself, do I really want to have children in this season? And just see what comes out. You can't lie to yourself. If you can lie to yourself looking in the mirror, you got bigger problems. I can't help you with that. However, I have found that if you can stare at yourself and look at yourself in the mirror, it's going to be that much harder for you to lie to yourself. So it keeps you honest.
I feel like you've just given us such a big gift. Like, I think this is going to be such a great tool for people who are listening to this. And I know it'll certainly be a recommendation with attribution, as I always love to give to your work, for people who are struggling. And like, honestly, even this podcast episode, we probably just rifled off, 20 different questions in the course of our conversation so far. Do I have the capacity to have a child? Ask yourself that, whose voice is this? Like saying these things out loud. That is a beautiful practice. And I especially like this idea of seeing yourself, because especially the people who are listening to this podcast, folks, I know are so self-aware. You are emotionally switched on. You are sensitive. You're going to know looking in your own eyes if you are telling a lie.
That's the point of all of it. Is that it keeps you honest. It keeps you less conflicted. I'm actually going to be on a podcast episode next month. And one of the questions that, they're going to ask me, they send me the questions ahead of time. And one of the questions that he asks is, what does wellness mean to you? It's a wellness podcast. And I've been thinking about it. And the answer that comes to mind is, wellness to me means that I am congruent with my thoughts, words, and actions, that I am living in alignment with what I think, what I say, and what I do. And it all has, like, that for me is being well, is that I am honest with myself on a day-to-day basis. It's not about the green smoothies and the red light therapy and all that stuff is great. It's about how honest are you with yourself? And so that's really what I see this conversation heading towards, Keltie, is that like we're inviting people to be honest with themselves about what they want, not what they think they should want based on society.
Absolutely. 100%. I couldn't agree more. So there's still this idea that having kids is like very much the normal path. It is the most selfless path, which I'm sure you have things to say about that. And that, what I sometimes hear from people, for example, is they're like, what if I don't want kids just because I want to choose the easy path? And I'm like, okay, so can you choose the easy path? What advice would you give to anybody who's struggling with guilt around choosing the child-free path because they feel like they've been told it's selfish, they're choosing like easiness? What would you say to them?
Oh man, I have so much to say, but I think I was going to say is like, live your life. Live your life. Like if you don't want to have kids, you don't want to have kids. Now the guilt that's coming up is probably just pointing to voices in your head that don't belong to you. They're not yours. That guilt is borrowed guilt. Maybe it's not even yours. Maybe you're just absorbing and internalizing what you've been told by society and how you should feel or think as a woman, whether or not you should have kids or not. But I would say, listen, I don't feel guilty about choosing this life. I do other things with my time. There's so much that you can do with your life and with your time if you choose not to have kids, right? I'm not saying that you can't do those things if you do have kids. I'm speaking to the person who doesn't want to have kids, who feels guilty around taking this easy path. And it's like, what's wrong with that? Like, question that. What's wrong with taking the easy path? Like, I'm just going to let that question just sit there. Like, says who? Says who that there's something wrong with taking the easy path? And is it really easy? You still have to take care of yourself. You still got to work. You still got to do everyday adulting stuff that we all have to do. Like, who said that? Right? So it's like we get to question once again these voices in our head that make us believe that our choices aren't valid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's been ingrained in us that life should be hard. And here's the thing, like life, have you looked outside recently? Like life will be hard on its own. You don't need to make it harder for yourself if it's not something you want. And I think, another piece of discernment, and this is something that came up in just another conversation I had, is like, is it your kind of hard? Because having kids is hard. And there's also wonderful things about it. But I think we have to what you were saying, look at our capacity and look at our innate traits. And I mean, you wrote a book. Writing a book is hard, presumably.
Yes, it is.
But for you, it's something you wanted to do.
Yes. So I put my focus into it. I didn't want to put listen, I always say when our desires are aligned with our heart, we have no problem putting our effort into it. I had no problem writing that book. It was hard. It was a lot of work, a lot of nights, a lot of mornings, but I wanted to do it. Mm-hmm. So I truly believe that if you wanted to have kids and you could, let's just say that everything's okay, that everything's fine and you're healthy and you can do that, like you would. I believe that if something is in alignment for us and something is right for us, like we are motivated to take action on it. Yeah. If you're not taking action on something, it's because you don't truly want it, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
Yeah. This
is the episode everybody needs. Everybody needs to listen to this episode because you're saying the hard truths that I think a lot of people need to hear, and they need to question, I think on the one hand, indecision around this decision makes sense. It's smart from the standpoint of this is something we should be questioning and being intentional about. And there's a lot of things, especially as women, that make this decision very hard for us. But I do think if you keep coming up against this wall of, I don't know. Well, why don't you know? To your point, and I know, the business coach Marie Forleo, I remember she's child-free by choice, her talking about it and saying something to the extent of like, there are so many things in my life that I'm clear about and that I want. Like, and to your point, I know what that feels like. I know what that looks like. And so if this isn't a yes, you know that because you know what a yes is for you.
Yeah, that's such a thank you so much for saying that. Like for the person who's on the fence and they're like, oh, I don't know. Think about how it feels, or not even think about it. How does it feel in your body when you're a clear yes? Mm-hmm. Right? Like you already have an experience of that. I'm sure like it just take something as simple as spaghetti or pizza, right? Like, oh, I want pizza. Okay. How does that feel in your body? You know what a yes feels like in your body. It doesn't even need to be this like loud hell yes. It's usually a quiet yes. Like for me, I just know there's no wondering. There's no doubt. Like I just know. And you have an opportunity here when it comes to you deciding whether or not to have kids to get to really know yourself and be honest with yourself. And you have the opportunity to actually ask yourself about the things that you truly want and whether you're doing it because somebody is suggesting that you do it or putting pressure on you or whether you really want to do it. But yeah, at the end of the day, we know. You know. So trust the part of you that knows and don't let society make you feel shitty for having clarity.
Yeah.
Because society capitalizes off of women's self-doubt.
That they do. Yeah. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. I mean, think about all the stuff that's being sold to women because they don't like themselves. They think they're ugly. Their lips need to be fuller. Their cheeks need to be fuller. Their eyelashes need to be freaking longer. Their butts need to be bigger. Their waists need to be more snatched, right? Like think about all the stuff. Like the more you doubt yourself, the more you're just going to be sold to. Yeah. You're just being sold a lie about what would make you look good but what actually makes you feel good is when you listen to yourself and do what you want to do. And if you don't want to have kids, you don't want to have kids, period. And you don't need to over explain yourself to anybody.
Well, I have nothing to add to that. I'm interested. So this decision not to have kids, you mentioned you're 42, same age as me. I'm interested how that has, I guess, really shaped your life and your identity. And has it also then played a role in other big decisions like, career, romance, any other aspects of life?
So yes, I mean, I love to travel. I just booked my trip to New York to go in March. I don't know when this is going to air, but I'm going in March to New York, and I'm like super excited about that. I have a condo in Mexico. I bought a condo in Mexico 3 years ago, actually. So I go to Playa del Carmen frequently. I shared with you, I think before we started, I just got back from Scotland. I went for the holidays. Like, I do what I want. It feels really good. Mm-hmm. I don't have any, and romantically, I'm not in a relationship right now. I'm single. So I am single and child free. So I am the
You're part of the happiest subpopulation demographic out there. I don't know if you know that. Child free single women are top the happiness charts. True story.
I'm not unhappy. I'll tell you that right now. I'm not unhappy in the least bit. I don't feel a void. I don't feel like something is missing in my life. If something is missing, it's usually something from within that I haven't given to myself. But I wouldn't say something is missing. Oh, it's a kid. No, that's not what's missing. It's like something that I need to do for myself or honor a need that I haven't given to myself. So my life is definitely, I do what I want when I want. It feels really good. I'm there for my family. My dad is dying right now, so I frequent Philly very often. My family's on the East Coast. So, I got a lot going. I have a very full life. And it's full as it is with my mental health challenges, with the business that I'm running. I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a podcast guest, like all these things, podcast host. And so it's like I have a lot of stuff on my plate, and I didn't want to add more to it. I mean, period. That's basically it.
Plate is full. I get it. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to touch on or say as it regards this topic, this decision, being child-free?
Yeah, I want everyone to be kind to themselves in this process, because society's going to make you feel really shitty about not having kids. They're going to make you feel like something is wrong with you, like you are less of a woman, you are less of a, you lack a maternal instinct, or you're not very nurturing. And none of that is true. I'm nurturing to myself. I am nurturing to my niece and nephew, my clients, my dog, my friends, my family. Like, it doesn't have to look a certain way. You get to create and design your life on your terms. So just be kind to yourself throughout that process, because it's going to feel like the world is against you and you are against you. So that's the last thing that you want when you're making this decision, is to be against yourself. You want to be for you. You are your greatest ally. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, I have 5 rapid fire questions that I love asking all my guests. The first 2 are, finish this sentence. Being child-free is?
Freedom.
Being child-free is not?
Terrible.
It's not. I can attest. What is one tool or resource that you think might help people who are on the fence about this decision? I know you've shared a bunch, but.
I think working with you would be very helpful. Getting
Great
someone,
idea.
working with a clarity coach, working with someone who is kind of helpful with this, and surround yourself with people who are also child free. That's what I would say. Like, if you're getting your information from people who are just trying to convince you in one direction, you want to talk to somebody who is neutral. Mm-hmm. So it might be a little difficult but if you're making the decision to not have kids, surround yourself with people who also don't have kids, so that you can kind of hear their perspective too, especially if it feels a little one-sided right now.
Yeah, absolutely. What is one thing that you want people who are moms to know, or parents to know?
That just because I'm selfish doesn't mean I'm a cold-hearted bitch. Yeah.
Yep. All right. And if you could give one piece of advice to someone who's currently on the fence about whether or not to have kids, what would that be?
If you're grappling with the decision that if you don't want to have kids, and like every part of your body is saying don't do it, then don't do it. Listen to your body. Your body knows the answer. I mean, it's literally where you will grow your child. Your body is literally giving you answers and cues every single day. So don't ignore what your body tells you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Where can people find you? We're going to include this resource you mentioned in the show notes. Again, it was 365 mirror
work prompts. Yes.
Mirror work prompts. Okay. Where can people find the book, find you? Is there anything else we need to know?
Yes, you can go to my website, vasavikumar.com. You can learn more about working with me. You can order my book. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle is my name is Vasavi. And yeah, that I just really hope people can continue this conversation and get get to a point of clarity within themselves, because it's a huge decision that you need to make. Yeah,
definitely. Well, I know people can do it. And I think this conversation has probably been an immense help in doing that. So I thank you for coming on for this talk. And we'll make sure to include all those links that Vasavi just mentioned in the show notes for today's episode. So thank you again for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
That concludes another episode of the Kids Are Child Free podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's conversation. Now, if you have not already done so, first of all, I want you to give us a follow over on Instagram. Our handle is @KidsOrChildFree. Otherwise, I will link to that in the show notes. And what I would love for you to do is to slide on into my DMs and let me know, who would you like to hear on the podcast as an upcoming guest? This can either be someone in particular that you would love for me to have a conversation with, or maybe it's a certain type of guest. There's somebody in particular that you are wanting to hear from, whether that be, hey, Keltie, I want to hear from somebody who had kids later in life, or I want to hear from somebody who specializes in childhood trauma, or whatever it may be. Let me know who you want to hear from, who would be an ideal guest, and I will do my very best to get them onto the podcast for a future episode.